Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari
Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari
Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Gopi Jana Balava Givaradhari
Gopi Jana Balava Givaradhari
Gopi Jana Balava Givaradhari Yashodanandana Vrajajanaranjana Yashodanandana Vrajajanaranjana Jamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Prabhupada ki, O Premanand.
Hare Hare Bol.
Reading from the Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 4, Chapter 18, Text 8. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
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 Nunam ta virudhakshina mayi kalena bhuyasha tattayogena drishtena bhavan adatum arati. Nunam, therefore, ta, those, virudha, herbs and grains, drishtina, deteriorated, mai, within me, kalena, in the course of time, yasha, very much, tatra, therefore, yogena, by proper means, drishtena, acknowledge, bhavan, your majesty, adatum, to take, arati, or translation. Due to being stocked for a very long time, all the grain seeds within me have certainly deteriorated. Therefore, you should immediately arrange to take these seeds out by the standard process, which is recommended by the acharyas or the shastra. Purport: when there is a scarcity of grains, the government should follow the methods prescribed in the Shastra and approved by the acharyas. Thus there will be a sufficient production of grains, and food scarcity and famine can be checked. Bhagavad Gita recommends that we perform yajna, sacrifices. By the performance of yajna, sufficient clouds gather in the sky, and when there are sufficient clouds, there is also sufficient rainfall. In this way, agricultural matters are taken care of. When there is sufficient grain production, the general populace eats the grains, and animals like cows, goats, and other domestic animals eat the grasses and grains also. According to this arrangement, human beings should perform the sacrifices recommended in the Shastra. And if they do so, there will be no food scarcity. In Kali Yuga, the only sacrifice recommended is Sankirtan Yajna. In this verse, there are two significant words, yogena, by the approved method, and drishtena, as exemplified by the former acharyas. One is mistaken if he thinks that applying modern machines such as tractors, grains can be produced. One goes to a desert and uses a tractor, there is still no possibility of producing grains. We may adopt various means, but it is essential to know that the planet Earth will stop producing grains if sacrifices are not performed. The Earth has already explained that because non-devotees are enjoying the production of food, she has reserved food seeds for the performance of sacrifice. Now, of course, atheists will not believe in this spiritual method of producing grains. But whether they believe or not, the fact remains that we are not independent to produce grains by mechanical means. As far as the approved method is concerned, it is enjoined in the Shastra that intelligent men in this age will take to the Sankirtan movement. And by doing so, they shall worship the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Lord Chaitanya, whose bodily complexion is golden, and it was always accompanied by his confidential devotees, to preach this Krishna consciousness movement all over the world. In its present condition, the world can only be saved by introducing this Sankirtan, this Krishna conscious movement. As we have learned from the previous verse, one who is not in Krishna consciousness is considered a thief. Even though he may be materially very advanced, a thief cannot be placed in a comfortable position. A thief is a thief, and he is punishable. Because people without Krishna consciousness, they have become thieves, and consequently they are being punished by the laws of nature. No one can check this, not even be introducing so many relief funds and humanitarian institutions. Unless the people of the world take to Krishna consciousness, there will be a scarcity of food and much suffering. Om Jnana Tinarandasya Jnanam Jana Shalakaya Akshurvrutam Yena Tasmai Sri Gurave Namaha Vichaitanya Manobhishtam Shapitam Yena Bhutale Sayam Rupa Kadamayam Dati Sapadantikam Panchakalpa Turubhyasya Kripa Sindhu Yayevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namah. Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasade Gaur Bhaktavinda.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
So, this is talking about in this verse the economic principle of grace. Everything you see is dependent on grace or mercy. There's 5 factors of action mentioned in Bhagavad Gita, and one is the endeavor. It's not that the endeavor is not important. It's not the only factor. Just like in modern age, sportsmen, they think by my effort, that I can take over and my effort. It just doesn't work that way. In a second, God can take away everything. Even when we speak, the inspiration has to come from Krishna. You may be so intelligent, but sarvasya chaham hri sanivishto matasmitir jnanam pona. I am situated in everyone's heart. For me comes remembrance, forgetfulness, and knowledge. So, this is the principle in all spheres of life that is missing in a modern materialistic viewpoint. And therefore, they're not really able to solve the problems of life. Prabhupada called this Maya Sukhaya. It's the illusion of happiness. You make some material advancement, and as much as you go forward, it goes back. Like, for example, they created the automobile. How convenient. Now, instead of walking across the street to the temple, you have to go through the Holland Tunnel. You can't, it just spreads everyone else out. The joy of living with your family and your friends. What we want in the Krishna consciousness movement is that we can, imagine the opulence of living across from a temple and all the community and all the friends are there. And you can walk into the temple and hear Krishna consciousness. So, there's a certain thing that is missing, a certain understanding. And that is just a simple, I remember I had one friend, he had a media company, he's a devotee. And he had what's called in the Yiddish language, chutzpah. Chutzpah means like no shame. You have no shame. So he was filming, he had a job to film the speakers at the Peterson Institute. The Peterson Institute is a think tank of the top economists in the world. You got David Rockefeller, and you got all the Federal Reserve chairmen and the president of the Bank of Israel, the president of the Bank of Switzerland. You got all the big, so he was there, and he filmed the thing, and then because he has chutzpah, he started to walk around and mingle with the people. And his nature is that has a high degree to conceptualize and express things. So he actually went, he sat in one conversation, they're talking around, and he said, did you ever think that an economic plan of trying to give unlimited resources, material resources, all over to the world, to everyone, in a paradigm where the resources of the world is limited, is about to fail?
And he said that they couldn't even go within the radar of their intelligence. It's Maya Sukhaya. It's just such a simple plan that they're not in control of the resources of the world. They're not in control of how they come, and they have no conception how to deal with it. I stopped, driving on the highway, and I stopped, and there was one little farmer's market by one of the rest stops, and one lady from New York City went up there 20 years to open a farm. She said, "It's so hard. It's so hard." Why? Because it's not by your own effort. You can't just crank it up and be successful. There's another factor. And what is that? It's the rains. As powerful as people have become, they can't control material nature. So what Prabhupada is saying here, opulence for two reasons. To satisfy people's desires so they can become peaceful for self-realization, and to be used as an offering to God so they can develop love in their hearts. That's the purpose of it. And it responds when it's used in that way. So therefore, without sacrifice, you can't have a relationship with the earth that's proper and prosperous. So everything depends on this principle of grace. That's why every single spiritual process is dependent on bhakti. Gyan is dependent on bhakti. Karma is dependent on bhakti. Yoga is dependent on bhakti. Bhakti is not dependent on anything. You don't have to have karma for bhakti. You don't have to have gyan for bhakti. You don't have to have yoga for bhakti. You have to have a heart for bhakti. They're all dependent. Why? Because you can't achieve anything. In karma, you need wealth and opulence. That it comes by God's grace. That's the principle called Daiva Netrena. There's a factor in the Govardhan Yajna, when the Govardhan, the Leela of Govardhan, when Krishna wants to stop the sacrifice on the basis of this principle. Yajna vai Vishnu. The sacrifice is meant for Vishnu. And his father is performing a great sacrifice. Okay, he's performing yajna to the demigods. It's indicative of their piety, because pious people always exhibit the principle of gratefulness. But there was a higher principle here. And the higher principle is here that ultimately it's meant for God. So why not offer it to Govardhan? Why not offer the sacrifice to Govardhan instead of Indra? You got the manifestation of Krishna right here. You don't have to worship the demigods. So Krishna sits on the lap of his father and he's trying to stop the sacrifice. And he's only like a young boy. What is he, 6 years old? And it's so charming. In broken language, he's giving arguments according to the 6 darshans. How to stop the Govardhan Yajna, the Yajna to Indra. And he said, and he just said, like, he started to preach bogus philosophy. But it was so charming. Right? Yeah, would we mind if like a little, 4-year-old kid came in here and started preaching Mayavadi philosophy? Wouldn't it be so cute? Everything is one, an illusion. So what happened is he preached this karma mamamsa. And this karma mamsa philosophy means that just by your work, everything will come. Why do you have to worship God? That's karma mamsa. Everything is coming by your work. Why do you have to worship God? One time I was in an astrologer in Jaipur.
and then his guru came in. And if you want to have like an archetype cartoon character for like a Brahmin, this guy, you know, a Brahmin astrologer, he must have had all debilitated planets because he had rings on every finger. You know, and he came in and he was like portly fat with a bubble bundy that you tie, and he had gray hair. And when he came in, he saw me sitting with his disciple. He looked at me with such disgust. And he said, "What is the use of your worship of Krishna? Simply by performing the sacrifice on the Swati Nakshastra, everything will come." That's Karma. Prabhupada said, no, Daivane Trena. It doesn't come. We see sometimes loving parents, they put all their effort into the child, he turns out to be a rascal. And then someone completely, neglects and someone, it's ultimately, it's not that the effort is not important, but the ultimate factor is the mercy of God. And mercy can be attracted. This is what people don't understand. They think ours is the path of grace. Why do anything? Because grace means what? Undeserved. So why, if we work or don't work, it still comes. No. Mercy is attracted. Mercy is something that comes where there is need from someone who's merciful. So when you express need, it's like when the rain comes, it's like lifting off the plastic cover. The rain will fall and fertilize the ground. There's something covering us from grace. It's that sense of independence. I do not need, and I don't want, because I want to make my own decisions to control the world, free from any restriction. When there's humility, humility attracts grace. Grace flows down. Unless you're down, unless you're open, the grace won't come. In the Yoga Sutras, when they discuss meditation, all the commentators recommend the worship of God, because without the principle of grace, you can't achieve it, because actually yoga is beyond your own effort. No one can become a perfect yogi on their own. If you understand what it means to stop every desire in your mind as the beginning process of yoga, then to go deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper. When you understand what it entails, you understand without grace. And that's why all the top yogis, they worship mantras, they worship God, because they have to get grace to be successful. So this principle of grace is the principle of success in every facet of life. Without humility, there's no chance of getting grace. Because you have no appreciation without that. You won't even recognize it. So what happens here, he's saying this is an economic problem. We are not independent to do anything by mechanical means. We can't get prema bhakti by mechanical means, no matter how many rounds you chant. You can't get material success by material means. And therefore, we won't solve the problems of life even by humanitarian material means. Not that we're against welfare or helping people, but it's not the solution ultimately. It's not the solution. You can't take away the spiritual factor from the solution. Because people are suffering from a lack of want. And the want is indicative. The want need is indicative of, on some level, of an abuse of the resources of God. Waste means want. Prabhupada's consciousness was so particular. When he would train devotees, he wouldn't like a faucet that was leaking. He saw every drop of water to be used appropriately for the service of God, for the service of devotees. So the problem is that we're thieves and we're being punished on every level. So what's the solution? The solution is Krishna consciousness. Sri Krishna Bhakti Rasa Bhavato Mati. That's the Sanskrit for Krishna consciousness. The term Krishna consciousness comes from Sri Dhanurdhara Swami's Pajavali. In one verse where he says, to get Krishna consciousness, there's only one qualification. It's your greed, your absolute desire that you must want it. And want what? Sri Krishna Bhakti Rasa Bhavato Mati. The mindset of a mood of love in a relationship with Krishna in a particular way. And that's what the world is about. Because that's who we are. We're servants of Krishna. And everything is Krishna's energy. And all spiritual life means is to line up your desires with reality. Because as soon as your desires exceed reality, they can only be fulfilled in illusion. And as soon as your desires go against nature, you suffer. So the whole Krishna consciousness is to somehow or other educate us in what actually exists so that we can participate in it in the proper way as servants of Krishna. And therefore, we have to, someone who's Krishna conscious, he looks at everything in that way. As soon as we become selfish, the concept of exploitation enters into the consciousness, and when the concept of exploitation enters into the consciousness, somehow or other people are harmed, we're going against the laws of nature, and there'll be a reaction to correct us. It's the fact. We can predict the future. If you see devotees and they are not situated properly, even if they're in positions of power and authority, you'll understand there will be a correction. Whether or not you want to overthrow them or preach to them or correct them or not, there will be a correction. It's the history of the Krishna consciousness movement. Nothing stays if it's out. It can stay. If you're not in a natural position, you can't stay. It's just like a lie. You can't keep it up. It's too much effort to keep up a lie. The truth is easy. You just repeat it all the time. You can't keep up a lie. So if your existence is a lie, if your existence is against nature, it's not a permanent thing. It's a mental imposition on reality. Anyway, Prabhupada's giving some economic advice, and the yajna is Sankirtan. You have to perform sacrifice. Nayam lokas yajnasya kutanya kuru satama. In the Bhagavad Gita it says, without sacrifice, Nayam lokas yajnasya lokasya kuta satana, something like that. I only remembered the verse because I chanted good rounds this morning. Otherwise it's absolutely impossible. I don't even try to remember that. Nayam lokas yajnasya kutanya kuru satama. Without sacrifice, there can be no happiness in this life or the next. And what does sacrifice means? It means taking energy and offering it to God. Without that, your heart will never be satisfied. And without that, your world will never be peaceful. Prabhupada is giving in the purport, and that's what this story is about. Any questions? Welcome on.
So Maharaj, you mentioned that grace is needed for success in any facet of life.
What's that?
You said that grace is needed for success
Yeah,
in any facet of life.
yeah.
And then you also mentioned that without humility there is no grace. Then how are people in the material world successful? Because they're not humble, then how are they receiving the grace?
Well, they're not successful. It's not successful if you're on death row and someone gives you your last meal. You know? Wow, look at me, I'm successful. I got my pizza, my pasta, you know what I'm saying? The last meal is not successful. And it's so temporary. And it's a result of something they did in the past. With sacrifice. Without humility, I would say this: you may have success, but it's relative success, and it'll never stay with you. So, yes, there are people that are successful in the material world, but then you have to say, really, what is success? Somehow or other, you have people who's fortunate and who's not. You know, it's, I mean, on many platforms, one, whatever they achieved is temporary. Also, it's superficial in the sense that happiness is consciousness. So what's the use if you get things and it's not used to improve your consciousness? So, humility is necessary to attract grace. Otherwise, why, and what is grace? Grace is ultimately what brings you closer to God. But whatever endeavor you want, there had to be some sacrifice. Even a person as wealthy, you know, it's so interesting. We have a sojourn of millions and billions of births, right? And then we have so much karma, and a lot of the karma is contradictory. Like, there's karma to be poor, there's karma to be rich. It can't be put in the same life. So God has to select which is karma to give. So let's say someone is a rascal and is very wealthy. He may have had, you know, 1,000 karmic things to be a poor guy and one to be rich, and God gives it to him. And the person who's poor may have had 1,000 karmic things to be rich, and God gave him the poor. But if you look at it in a broad spectrum, and you know, who is more fortunate? So let me maybe qualify my statement about humility is, I would say, in the process, let's say at least in the process of spiritual practice, bhakti, the process of bhakti, you can't, grace is always there, it'll never be utilized or realized without humility. Okay, I'm going to head out for the day. So tomorrow I'm going to be giving class, and then I'll come back and I'll start to give class again a week from today. And then I'll be